Sometimes the greatest miracle begins long before anyone realizes a life has been saved. The quiet farming town of Maple Ridge, Nebraska, had never seen anything like it. Three identical black Cadillacs rolled slowly down the narrow country road just after sunrise, their polished exteriors reflecting the soft golden light of a peaceful morning. They turned into the gravel driveway of Walker Auto Repair, a modest garage with faded wooden siding, an aging American flag gently waving above the entrance, and a hand-painted sign that had greeted neighbors for nearly 2 decades. The sound of the engines faded into complete silence as the luxury vehicles came to a stop. Every mechanic inside the shop paused. Customers waiting beside their pickup trucks looked up in confusion. Across the street, a retired farmer lowered his coffee mug without taking another sip. Curtains moved inside nearby homes as curious neighbors stepped onto their front porches. In a town where everyone knew everyone else, no one could imagine why such expensive cars had arrived at the smallest repair shop in the county. Ethan Walker wiped a trace of engine oil from his hands with an old shop towel before slowly walking out of the garage. At 41 years old, the widowed single father looked exactly as he always did, wearing a faded red and black flannel shirt, worn blue jeans, and brown work boots marked by years of honest labor. His short brown hair had already begun to gray near the temples, and the lines around his eyes reflected countless early mornings spent raising his young daughter while keeping his small business alive. He glanced from one Cadillac to another with quiet curiosity rather than concern. Before he could say a single word, the rear door of the middle vehicle opened. A graceful blonde woman stepped onto the gravel, dressed in an elegant navy business suit that seemed strangely out of place against the simple backdrop of tractors, old pickup trucks, and endless Nebraska farmland. Her posture carried unmistakable confidence, yet her eyes revealed deep emotion that no amount of wealth could conceal. She looked directly at Ethan, took several slow steps toward him, and stopped only a few feet away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, she smiled through grateful eyes, closed the remaining distance, and wrapped both arms around the surprised mechanic. Ethan stood motionless for a heartbeat before gently returning the embrace, still unable to understand why this remarkable stranger seemed overwhelmed simply to see him again. Around them, every conversation disappeared. Even the morning birdsong seemed quieter than before. The executives standing beside the Cadillacs lowered their eyes respectfully, as though they already understood the significance of the moment, while everyone else struggled to make sense of what they were witnessing. After several silent seconds, the woman stepped back just enough to look at Ethan once more. "I've been searching for you since yesterday," she said softly. "I prayed I would find you before another sunrise." Ethan offered a modest smile, filled with genuine confusion. "I'm sorry," he answered politely. "Have we met before?" Her expression trembled between relief and disbelief. "You do not remember me because you never stayed long enough for me to thank you." A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut hay across the driveway, while sunlight stretched over the quiet fields beyond the garage. Every neighbor leaned forward, waiting for an explanation that none of them could possibly predict. What they did not know was that only 24 hours earlier, during the worst storm Maple Ridge had seen in years, an ordinary single father had made one quiet decision beside Silver Lake that would forever change the lives of 2 families, unite 2 completely different worlds, and prove that true greatness often walks away long before anyone learns its name. 24 hours earlier, the morning had begun like hundreds before it, quiet enough for the sound of meadowlarks to drift across the open Nebraska fields before the first pickup truck rolled down the county road. Ethan Walker unlocked the front door of Walker Auto Repair just as the eastern sky turned pale gold. He paused for a brief moment, not because he was tired, but because he always looked toward the small white farmhouse beside the garage before beginning another day. Inside, 9-year-old Lily Walker stood on a wooden chair preparing pancakes with careful determination while humming softly to herself. "Do not forget your lunch, sweetheart," Ethan said with a warm smile as he poured a glass of orange juice. Lily laughed. Only if you promise to eat yours too. Their mornings always followed the same simple rhythm. Breakfast together, a short drive to school. Then Ethan spent the day repairing engines, while Lily filled notebooks with dreams far bigger than their little town. Since losing his wife several years earlier, Ethan had quietly carried every responsibility alone without ever asking anyone to feel sorry for him. His neighbors respected him because he never complained, never overcharged a struggling customer, and never turned away someone whose family depended on an old truck that refused to start. By 7:30 that morning, the garage doors were open and the familiar scent of motor oil, clean steel, and fresh coffee filled the workshop. An elderly rancher arrived with a weathered pickup that had nearly 300,000 miles on its odometer. Ethan listened patiently before lifting the hood. "You only need a replacement belt," he explained. "The rest of the engine is still strong." The rancher reached for his wallet. Ethan shook his head with a quiet smile. "Save your money for feeding those cattle. This one is on me." The grateful man tried to argue, but Ethan had already picked up his tools. Moments like that happened almost every day, and he never spoke about them afterward because kindness was simply part of who he was. Late that morning, after driving Lily to school and returning to the garage, Ethan noticed the wind beginning to change. The flags hanging outside nearby businesses fluttered more sharply than usual, and dark clouds slowly gathered beyond the western horizon. A local radio station interrupted its country music with an updated weather bulletin predicting severe thunderstorms by early afternoon. Farmers began securing equipment, while families hurried through errands before the rain arrived. Ethan glanced toward the sky, then toward Silver Lake several miles away, where unexpected storms often swept across the open water with little warning. He quietly checked the emergency rescue bag stored behind his workbench, the same waterproof pack he had carried ever since volunteering for community water rescue training years before. He hoped he would never need it, but experience had taught him that preparation was another form of caring for people. By early afternoon, the air had grown unusually heavy. Thunder echoed faintly across the countryside, and the peaceful town continued with ordinary life, completely unaware that somewhere above the gathering storm clouds, a private aircraft carrying one of the most powerful women in America had already begun the flight that would soon bring two completely different worlds together beside the restless waters of Silver Lake. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the storm had fully arrived. Heavy rain swept across the Nebraska countryside, turning the clear summer sky into a wall of dark clouds that stretched far beyond the horizon. Wind bent the tall grass surrounding Walker Auto Repair, while distant thunder rolled across the plains with growing intensity. Ethan Walker had just finished replacing the battery in an old family sedan when the sharp sound of a low-flying aircraft caught his attention. It was not unusual for small planes to pass overhead, but something about this one felt different. The engines sounded strained, and the aircraft was descending much lower than normal. Ethan stepped outside the garage, shielding his eyes from the rain as he searched the sky. A sleek white private jet emerged beneath the cloud cover, flying unevenly towards Silver Lake. For one brief moment, it appeared the pilots might regain control. Then the aircraft continued descending until it disappeared behind the trees surrounding the shoreline. Seconds later, a deep splash echoed through the storm. The sound carried across the fields with unmistakable force. Every instinct Ethan possessed told him exactly what had happened. Without hesitation, he reached for the emergency rescue backpack hanging behind the garage door, grabbed a waterproof flashlight, a rescue rope, and his cellular phone. While running toward his pickup truck, he dialed 911. "This is Ethan Walker at Walker Auto Repair," he said calmly as the operator answered. "A private jet has gone down in Silver Lake. Please dispatch every available rescue unit immediately. I am heading there now." The dispatcher confirmed that emergency responders were already being notified and instructed him to wait for professional crews. Ethan glanced toward the storm outside his windshield. "I understand," he replied, "but they may need help before anyone else arrives." The drive to the public boat launch normally took less than 10 minutes, but sheets of rain reduced visibility and forced every vehicle on the road to slow down. Even before reaching the lake, Ethan could see flashing hazard lights from several motorists who had stopped after witnessing the aircraft descend. He pulled into the gravel parking area beside the boat launch and immediately spotted the damaged jet floating only a short distance from shore, its fuselage partially submerged while several passengers stood on one wing waiting for assistance. A pair of fishermen had already launched a small aluminum boat toward them, and other bystanders shouted encouragement from the shoreline. Ethan quickly secured the rescue rope around a dock post before joining the effort. Years earlier, after severe flooding affected nearby communities, he had completed volunteer water rescue training through the County Emergency Response Program. He had always hoped those skills would never be needed. Now, every lesson returned with remarkable clarity. Working alongside the fishermen, he helped guide frightened passengers toward the shallow water where other volunteers assisted them onto shore. Rain continued pounding the lake, while emergency sirens grew louder in the distance. Just as Ethan believed everyone had escaped safely, a soaked flight attendant stumbled toward him, breathing heavily. "There is still one passenger inside," she said anxiously. "She went back for something important. She never came out." Ethan turned immediately toward the damaged aircraft. The cabin doorway remained partially above the waterline, but the jet drifted gently farther from shore with every passing second. He took one steady breath, tightened the straps on his rescue vest, looked toward the approaching emergency vehicles, and then made a quiet decision that would forever change not only his own life, but the future of someone he had never met. Rain continued sweeping across Silver Lake as Ethan Walker secured the rescue rope around his waist and stepped into the cold water with steady determination. Behind him, the flashing lights of sheriff deputies, firefighters, and paramedics became brighter through the storm, but they were still several minutes away from reaching the stranded aircraft. One of the fishermen called after him. "The current is getting stronger." Ethan nodded without looking back. "Keep the rope tight. If I signal, pull with everything you have." He moved carefully through the waist-deep water until he reached the damaged jet. The aircraft rocked gently with every wave, its open cabin door only a few feet above the waterline. Inside, rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling while emergency lights cast a faint amber glow across the narrow aisle. Ethan called out in a calm voice, "Is anyone still here?" For a brief moment, only the sound of rain answered him. Then a quiet voice came from deeper inside the cabin. "Please, I am here." Ethan followed the sound and found a woman kneeling beside a leather seat, struggling to free a small waterproof case that had become trapped beneath a shifted piece of luggage. Her navy business suit was soaked, loose strands of blonde hair clung to her face, and although fear was visible in her eyes, she remained remarkably composed. Ethan immediately focused on what mattered most. "Forget the case," he said gently. "We need to leave now." She hesitated only for a second before looking down at the trapped case once more. "It contains something that cannot be replaced." Ethan knelt beside her, examined the obstruction, and carefully shifted the luggage aside just enough to release it. He placed the case into her hands and offered a reassuring smile. "Now we go together." She accepted his hand without another word. The cabin tilted slightly as another wave pushed against the aircraft, reminding both of them that every passing moment mattered. Ethan guided her slowly back toward the cabin door, making certain each step was secure before moving to the next. Once outside, he wrapped one arm around the rescue rope while encouraging her to hold firmly to his shoulder. The water was cold and the rain showed no sign of stopping, yet his voice never rose above a calm, steady tone. "Keep looking at the shoreline," he said. "Do not look behind you. We are almost there." She followed every instruction, trusting a complete stranger whose confidence seemed stronger than the storm itself. As they moved closer to shore, firefighters entered the shallow water to assist them the remaining distance. Paramedics immediately placed warm blankets around the woman while checking that she was safe. Ethan quietly stepped back, allowing the emergency teams to do their work. A sheriff's deputy approached with a notepad. "Sir, I need your name for the incident report." Ethan answered politely, gave his full name, described exactly what he had witnessed, and remained only long enough to ensure every passenger had been accounted for. Nearby, the woman looked around through the crowd, searching for the man who had refused to leave her behind. By the time she was able to stand, Ethan had already returned the borrowed rescue rope to the fisherman, thanked every volunteer who had helped, and walked back toward his aging pickup truck without waiting for recognition or reward. He drove away beneath the fading storm clouds while the woman watched the empty road in quiet disbelief, realizing she had never even learned the name of the ordinary mechanic whose quiet courage had just changed the course of her life. By early evening, the storm had drifted east, leaving Silver Lake calm once again as if nothing extraordinary had ever happened. Inside the regional medical center, Victoria Sterling sat quietly beside a large window overlooking the rain-soaked parking lot. A warm blanket rested across her shoulders while a physician finished reviewing the final results of her examination. "You are going to be just fine," he said with a reassuring smile. "You should plan to rest for a couple of days, but there are no serious injuries. And I have one more piece of good news. Your pregnancy appears healthy. Everything looks exactly as we would hope." Victoria slowly closed her eyes, allowing those words to settle into her heart. She placed one hand gently over her abdomen, overwhelmed by the realization that she had nearly lost far more than her own future. After a quiet moment, she looked toward the physician. "The man who brought me out of that airplane," she asked softly. "Did anyone get his name?" The physician shook his head. By the time our team arrived, he had already disappeared. Victoria smiled faintly despite her disappointment. "He did not disappear," she replied. "He simply chose not to stay." Less than an hour later, members of her executive security team arrived from Omaha. They expected to escort one of the most influential business leaders in America back to safety, but instead, they found a woman focused on only one objective. "I want you to find the man who saved my life," she said calmly. One security officer nodded confidently. "We will locate him." Victoria looked directly at him. "Not because he rescued the chief executive officer of Sterling Aerospace. Find him because a good man walked away without asking for anything in return." The search began immediately. Security specialists contacted local authorities, interviewed emergency responders, and reviewed every available report from the rescue. The sheriff remembered a mechanic who had remained long enough to provide a witness statement before quietly leaving. The fisherman remembered his calm voice and the old pickup truck he drove. A paramedic remembered seeing the name Walker stitched above the pocket of his faded work shirt. Piece by piece, the picture became clearer. Meanwhile, nearly 20 miles away, Ethan Walker had already returned to the life he understood best. He picked Lily up after her after-school program, listened patiently as she described her science project, and stopped at the neighborhood grocery store to buy bread, milk, and tomato soup. During dinner, Lily noticed a scrape across her father's hand. "Did something happen at work today?" she asked. Ethan smiled gently. "A few people needed some help by the lake." Lily tilted her head with quiet curiosity. "Did everybody make a home?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, that is what matters." She smiled with relief before reaching for another spoonful of soup, completely unaware that the woman her father had rescued was already moving every available resource to find him. After Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone on the front porch, watching stars slowly emerge between the remaining clouds. He thought briefly about the frightened woman from the airplane and hoped she was safely home with her family. Satisfied that she would be cared for, he let the memory drift quietly into the night. He had no way of knowing that before the next sunrise, a convoy of black luxury vehicles would be traveling toward the little garage where he expected nothing more extraordinary than another ordinary day of honest work. The first rays of sunlight had barely reached the rooftops of Maple Ridge when Walker Auto Repair opened for another ordinary morning. Ethan Walker rolled up the garage door, switched on the lights above the service bays, and placed a fresh pot of coffee beside the old cash register exactly as he did every day. To him, yesterday's rescue already belonged in the past. There were engines to repair, customers to help, and a daughter waiting for him to pick her up after school. A delivery driver waved as he passed the garage. 2 regular customers arrived within minutes, both expecting routine maintenance on aging pickup trucks. Nothing about the peaceful morning suggested that the entire town was about to witness something unforgettable. Then the distant sound of powerful engines echoed across the quiet streets. Heads turned almost immediately. 3 identical black Cadillacs appeared at the end of the county road, moving slowly through the center of town with polished paint reflecting the bright morning sun. The convoy passed the grocery store, the post office, and the small church before turning directly into the gravel driveway of Walker Auto Repair. Curious neighbors stopped watering their gardens. A school bus driver slowed almost to a stop. Several customers stepped away from the garage, wondering whether important government officials had somehow arrived in their little farming community. Ethan walked outside with the same calm expression he carried through every challenge life placed before him. He looked at the elegant vehicles without excitement or concern. "Can I help you?" he asked politely as the middle Cadillac came to a gentle stop. The rear passenger door opened, and Victoria Sterling stepped onto the gravel. She no longer looked like the exhausted woman who had emerged from the storm the previous afternoon. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, her posture reflected confidence, yet her eyes carried unmistakable gratitude. For a few silent seconds, she simply looked at Ethan, almost as though she wanted to be certain he was real. Then she walked toward him with measured steps. Ethan studied her face carefully. Something about her seemed familiar, although he could not immediately place where they had met. Victoria stopped only a few feet away. Her voice was soft, but every person standing nearby heard her words clearly. "I have been looking for you since yesterday." Ethan smiled politely. "I'm glad you found who you were searching for." She shook her head gently. "You still do not remember me, do you?" Ethan looked at her for another moment before recognition slowly appeared in his eyes. "Silver Lake," he said quietly. "You were the passenger inside the aircraft." Victoria nodded, her grateful smile growing warmer. "Yes, and you were the man who refused to leave me behind." Before Ethan could answer, she stepped forward and embraced him with genuine appreciation, unconcerned by the surprised faces surrounding them. The executives accompanying her remained respectfully silent, while the entire garage fell completely still. After a long moment, Victoria stepped back. "Thank you," she whispered. "There are not enough words for what you gave me yesterday." Ethan offered the same humble smile that had guided him through countless ordinary days. "You do not owe me thanks," he replied. "Anyone standing where I was would have done the same thing." Victoria looked into his eyes with quiet certainty and slowly shook her head. "No," she answered. "Many people would have wanted recognition. Many would have expected something in return. You asked for nothing, and that is exactly why I had to find you." In that silent moment, everyone watching realized they were witnessing something far more valuable than wealth meeting humility. They were watching gratitude find the quiet dignity that had never asked to be seen. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The quiet around Walker Auto Repair seemed almost sacred, as though even the morning breeze understood that something far more important than business was taking place. Victoria Sterling finally reached into her handbag and removed a neatly folded medical report. She held it carefully before looking back at Ethan with grateful eyes. "Yesterday, after I arrived at the hospital, the doctors completed every examination," she said softly. "They told me that I was healthy." She paused, taking a slow breath before continuing. "Then they gave me another piece of news that changed everything." Ethan listened without interrupting. "They confirmed that my baby is healthy as well." His expression immediately softened. "That is wonderful news," he answered with genuine warmth. Victoria smiled, but tears quietly gathered in her eyes. "You thought you were rescuing one frightened passenger," she said. "You actually saved 2 lives." Everyone standing nearby fell completely silent. Several mechanics lowered their eyes, while one elderly customer quietly removed his cap out of simple respect. Ethan looked at the medical report only briefly before returning his attention to Victoria. "I'm very grateful that both of you are safe," he said. "That is all anyone could hope for." Victoria slowly shook her head. "No, Ethan. Most people hope for recognition. Some hope for rewards. You drove home, picked up your daughter, ate dinner, and went to sleep without even knowing whether I would ever find you. Ethan gave a modest smile. You had doctors, your family, and people who cared about you. You did not need me anymore. She answered almost immediately. I needed the chance to say, thank you. One of her senior executives quietly stepped forward carrying a leather portfolio. He opened it and prepared several documents along with what appeared to be a certified check. Victoria accepted the envelope and extended it toward Ethan. Please allow me to repay at least a small part of what you have done for my family. Ethan did not even reach for it. Instead, he folded the shop towel, still resting in his hands, and spoke with the same calm honesty that had guided every decision of his life. Victoria, if I accept money for helping someone in danger, then yesterday becomes a transaction instead of the right thing to do. I cannot let that happen. She looked at him in complete disbelief. Do you even know who I am? Ethan smiled politely. You are the woman from the airplane. That is enough for me. A quiet laugh escaped several people standing nearby, but Victoria remained perfectly still. I'm a founder and chief executive officer of Sterling Aerospace, she explained. People spend months trying to schedule 10 minutes with me. Entire companies compete for my attention. Ethan nodded respectfully. Then you must have many responsibilities. His answer contained neither admiration nor intimidation. It was simply an observation. Victoria stared at him for another long moment before slowly lowering the envelope. For perhaps the first time in many years, someone had looked beyond her title, her wealth, and her reputation. He had seen only another human being who needed help. She smiled through grateful tears and quietly said, Yesterday you reminded me that dignity cannot be purchased, and this morning you proved that character does not depend on a person's bank account. Ethan shrugged gently. My father used to tell me that titles belong at work. Out here, people matter more. Those simple words settled over the gathering like the morning sunlight itself, leaving everyone present with the unmistakable feeling that they had just witnessed a lesson far greater than success, because true greatness had been standing in a small-town garage all along, wearing oil-stained work boots and expecting nothing in return. Victoria Sterling remained silent for a long moment before carefully placing the unopened envelope back into the leather portfolio. She realized that every dollar inside had just become meaningless. Ethan Walker had not rejected her generosity. He had rejected the idea that compassion should ever carry a price. A gentle breeze moved across the garage entrance, carrying the scent of fresh-cut hay from nearby fields while the small crowd continued watching in complete silence. Finally, Victoria smiled with a new understanding. Then I've been trying to thank you in the wrong way, she said. Ethan tilted his head slightly. What do you mean? She glanced toward the quiet town surrounding them before speaking again. You refuse a reward because you believe kindness should keep helping people instead of enriching one person. Ethan answered with a thoughtful nod. If something good comes from yesterday, I hope it reaches families who might someday need the same chance. Those words settled deeply within her heart. She turned toward one of her executives. Please call the board of the Sterling Foundation. The executive immediately reached for his telephone. Tell them to prepare an emergency community investment proposal. I want preliminary plans on my desk by tonight. Ethan looked genuinely puzzled. You do not have to do anything because of me. Victoria smiled warmly. This is not because of you alone. It is because yesterday reminded me what leadership is supposed to accomplish. She slowly walked toward the edge of the driveway, where she could see Silver Lake shimmering in the distance beyond the fields. How far is the lake from here? She asked. About 7 miles, Ethan replied. There have been several water rescues over the years. Most volunteer crews drive in from neighboring counties. Victoria turned back toward him. Then that should change. She looked once more at her executive team. Sterling Foundation will fully fund a modern community rescue center near Silver Lake. It will include emergency equipment, rescue boats, advanced training facilities, and educational programs for local volunteers. No family should ever have to wait for help because resources are too far away. The crowd exchanged astonished glances. Even the sheriff, who had quietly arrived during the conversation, could hardly believe what he had just heard. Victoria continued before anyone could respond. And there will be one more commitment. She smiled gently. A permanent education scholarship for Lily Walker. It will support her dreams wherever they lead, whether she chooses engineering, medicine, teaching, or anything else. Ethan immediately raised his hand. Victoria, that is too much. She calmly shook her head. No, too much would have been allowing gratitude to end with a check that disappears into a bank account. This will remain long after both of us are gone. Ethan stood quietly, reflecting on her words. He imagined children learning water safety, volunteers receiving better equipment, and families finding hope during emergencies because one rescue had inspired something much larger. Slowly, his expression softened into a grateful smile. If this center belongs to the community, he said, and if every family will be welcome, then I cannot think of a better way to honor what happened yesterday. Victoria extended her hand. Ethan accepted it with quiet respect, and instead of celebrating a financial gift, they sealed a promise that would protect countless strangers they would probably never meet. In that simple handshake, wealth found purpose, humility found partnership, and a single act of quiet courage began growing into a legacy that would reach far beyond one remarkable afternoon beside Silver Lake. 1 year later, the shoreline of Silver Lake looked very different. Where there had once been only an aging public boat launch and a weathered wooden dock, a modern brick building now stood beneath a bright blue Nebraska sky. Above its entrance, polished bronze letters read Walker Community Rescue Center, a name chosen not because Ethan Walker had asked for recognition, but because the people of Maple Ridge insisted that future generations should know how one quiet act of courage had changed their town forever. Rescue boats rested beside newly constructed docks, classrooms welcomed volunteers from across the county, and emergency training sessions filled the calendar throughout every season. Children learned water safety during summer programs, while local firefighters and volunteer responders trained together using equipment that many small communities could only dream about. Yet despite everything that had changed, Ethan himself had changed very little. Every weekday morning, he still unlocked Walker Auto Repair before sunrise, brewed fresh coffee, greeted customers by name, and treated every person with the same quiet respect that had always defined his life. The garage remained modest. The old American flag still waved above the entrance, and his worn work boots still carried traces of honest labor. Lily Walker had grown taller over the past year, and her curiosity about engineering had blossomed into a genuine passion. With support from the Sterling Foundation Scholarship, she attended science camps, built small robotic projects, and dreamed about designing safer aircraft one day. Whenever anyone congratulated her, she smiled and answered exactly as her father had taught her. The opportunity matters more than the attention. On a warm Saturday afternoon, the town gathered outside the rescue center for its first anniversary celebration. Families filled the lawn with picnic blankets, while children laughed near the lake that had once witnessed an unforgettable storm. Ethan stood quietly near the back of the crowd, hoping the focus would remain on the volunteers and instructors rather than himself. Victoria Sterling noticed him almost immediately. She walked over carrying a smiling baby boy in her arms, healthy, curious, and completely unaware that his story had begun long before his first breath. "There is someone I want you to meet," she said warmly. Ethan smiled as the little boy reached toward him with innocent fascination. "He is growing fast," Ethan said. "Victoria Nadif. His name is James." She paused before adding softly, "Every birthday he celebrates will remind me that quiet kindness can echo across an entire lifetime." Ethan looked at the child with genuine happiness before handing him gently back to his mother. He is going to have every chance to do something good for this world. Victoria Smaïd, just like the man he unknowingly met before he was even born. As the afternoon came to an end, the crowd applauded the volunteers who had completed another rescue training demonstration. The applause gradually faded until only the peaceful sounds of the lake remained. Ethan and Victoria stood side by side, overlooking the calm water where their lives had first crossed paths. Neither of them spoke for several moments, because some truths become stronger in silence than they ever could through speeches. The storm had passed long ago, but its greatest gift had remained. One ordinary father had chosen compassion over recognition. One grateful mother had transformed gratitude into lasting service. A small town had discovered that true wealth is measured not by what people keep for themselves, but by what they quietly leave behind for others. And as the evening sun reflected across the gentle surface of Silver Lake, it became clear that dignity never needed to raise its voice, because when kindness is real, the world eventually grows quiet enough to hear it.